So here we have the box itself, which is pretty plain. There's nothing much to see over here, but we can assume that retail units that are sold in India will be full of information. And the first thing that we see is a little cardboard folder with a SIM eject tool, a clear transparent case, and some literature. We then come to the phone itself. As you can see, this one is black with a very glossy rear and a water drop shaped notch right on the top. We'll turn that on. And as we're waiting for it to boot, let's take a look at the rest of the box contents. Well, as it turns out, there isn't much to see, just a charger with an Oppo logo over there, and it's pretty much like the chargers we've seen on other Oppo phones before. This one's rated at 5 volts 2 amps. And we have a USB cable. Standard Type A on one side, and unsurprisingly micro USB on the other. Let's go through the setup process. So now that we've quickly skipped through the setup process, you can see the phone with the screen lit up, and that of course highlights the water drop shaped notch, which we've seen on a few Oppo and Vivo phones before now. Realme claims to have achieved a 90% screen to body ratio thanks to the use of this very tall 19.5 by 9 screen, and there is Gorilla Glass over it on the front, though we don't know what version number quite yet. So there's still a bit of a chin on the bottom and still relatively thick borders. You can see that the edges of the phone are rounded, which sort of masks really how much space there is between the edge of the screen and the edge of the device itself, but it still looks pretty good and it looks pretty slick. On the back we have a very glossy polycarbonate finish. Now this looks like glass, but it isn't. This phone is available in 3 colors, blue and black, which have matte finishes, and there's also an ice option which the company says is electroplated, and we're going to have to wait a little while till we get to see that one. This is obviously the black one that we have with us right now. There's a bump around the cameras, and these are dual rear cameras, but one of them is 16 megapixels while the other is just a depth sensor. And of course you can see a flash over there, a fingerprint sensor, and this rather large Realme logo. The sides of the phone are plain, and there's the the power button on this side, volume buttons on this side, and there's a tray right here which we can also take a look at. As we can see, there are individual slots for 2 nano SIMs and 1 micro SD card. Let's just quickly take a look at the top, where there's really nothing to see except a little pinhole for a microphone. And on the bottom here we have a 3.5mm audio socket, another microphone, a micro USB port, and a speaker. So now getting back to the display of this phone, it is a 6.3 inch panel with a full HD plus resolution that is 1080 pixels horizontally and 2340 vertically. What we see over here is ColorOS 5.2, Oppo's custom Android skin, which runs on top of Android 8.1. There appear to be quite a few preloaded apps. Some of them don't seem to be in English, and some of them are clearly specific to other countries. So we hope that the retail units that go on sale in India do have localized apps. Until that point, we can't really comment on the amount of bloatware that this phone will come preloaded with, but we can see a few familiar icons like Opera over there and UC Browser as well. Inside this phone we have a Qualcomm Snapdragon 660 processor, which means that this phone is likely to be quite a little bit more expensive than the Realme 2. We also know that it will be available with up to 8GB of RAM and 128GB of storage, and there will most likely be variants with 4 GB of RAM and 64 GB of storage, 6 GB of RAM and 64 GB storage, and the top end one with 8 GB of RAM and 128 GB of storage. There's also a 3500 mAh battery inside this phone. Now it's 8.5 millimeters thick and it weighs 174 grams, which means that it is relatively bulky, but not a lot more bulky than the average 5.5-inch phone would have been just a year or two ago. So people will still find this relatively easy to use. As you can see, we have to stretch quite a bit right now, and it's awkward to reach all corners of the screen with just one thumb or even with two thumbs. So of course this will only really appeal to people who like big phones to begin with.